Well, good morning, everybody. As you come back to your seats, just want to welcome those of you who might be here for the first time. Just join Tim by saying to you, thank you so much for being here. This is a wonderful, wonderful season, right? The weather's not too shabby, is it? It's beautiful, beautiful. I've lived in the north quite a bit, and I'll tell you what, I love Texas Christmas because you can get around. You can drive on the roads. You don't have to fight the snow. Snow's beautiful, but then you have to handle all the other stuff after it, the slush and all. So how many of you are glad to be in Texas? That's good. I'm glad that you're here this morning. I want to introduce somebody that's going to be speaking. Most of you know Charity Bradshaw. Charity and her family moved here 3 years ago. She and Ted, their three beautiful daughters, they're a part of our church family. She's an author. She also helps people write books, and she's an outstanding speaker. We had her speak our first Wednesday the last time, and we're kind of blown away by it. It was just really, really wonderful. And Kenneth was slated to speak today, but he said, Dad, I think that you ought to have Charity speak. So we're going to get Charity up here, and she's going to share the word with us. And I just want you to give a hand clap and a welcome to Charity Bradshaw.
We get to worship at home. And part of worship, and this is good, so write it down or tweet me later. Part of worship is intentionally increasing the value of those around us. Intentionally increasing the value of those around us. Now, what does this look like at home? We have that person, some of us have that person, and this is a married or single situation because we've got people that are around us. We've got people that we live with or invest in on a regular basis. But let's talk about spouses. What's so great is because my husband's not here, I get to talk about him, and he doesn't get to defend himself. So, there's that. You can confirm or deny things later with him. But, so it is worship to God to create a culture of honor in our homes, of deference to our spouse, of appreciation of our spouse, to value and serve our spouse. I think a lot of times it's easy to look at what can I get out of this, or I'm not getting this met, and I'm not having my needs taken care of, when really that's not even the design of marriage. The design is to offer your life as a sacrifice to God, to your spouse, all of those things. And some of you may or may not know this, but both my husband and I are children of divorce. We took some time one day, and it took a long time because we were trying to count the divorces. And I think we got to around 8 official divorces between our two birth parents. That's a few, more than the average bear, I would guess. So one of the things when it came time for us to soberly walk into the agreement of marriage was we didn't want what we saw. None of it. How many of you can say that you don't want any of what you saw? You didn't want to repeat any of it. You're like, outside of the having kids part, no, thank you, none of that. So we decided that we were going to set our marriage up differently. We decided that we were going to have rules that we abided by, no matter how angry, no matter how frustrated, no matter how hurt we were, that there were things that we would not break that we agreed upon beforehand. One of them was that we would never, ever, ever insult each other. Never in joking. Anybody in here a words of affirmation person? Like words are important to you? Okay, like all 5 of us. I love you, I love you, I love you. I love myself. No. Words of affirmation are important to me. That's how like you imagine the balloon, it's like, tss, tss, yes, I feel really good now. So we decided that words were going to be, off limits. We weren't going to speak anything negative in our house about each other, and especially apart from each other. So we'll see how I do today. But we promised that we'd never make fun of each other. And one of the things that Ted even told me, he wrote his vows. I wrote a song, but I was unable to sing it because you guys know I'm emotional. So I had somebody else sing it, but it was great. But he said his vows to me, and when I was writing this, one of the things that came back to my mind was the line that he wrote, and it said, And he was saying this to me, and I'm like up there like just, oh my gosh, you're so fine. Trying to hear what he's saying through the fineness. And he goes, I promise to cherish you as an act of worship to the Father. And man, he does. I stink, I'm so spoiled. I mean, he really does spoil me, and he really does cherish me as an act of worship, and I get to reciprocate that. And he is a saint because he has rehabilitated me from being a very crunchy person. Let me tell you a little bit of deep dish about me. I'm also a pastor's kid. Don't throw anything. But, I grew up in a home where there was Sunday morning, and then there was everything else. And everything else didn't exactly match Sunday morning. And that caused me to really not like anything about Sundays. There was a lot of yelling, a lot of arguing, and a lot of tension in our home. And when you say never, just watch out. I'm never going to be a minister. I'm never going to, be anything like a pastor. And then, look, there it is. I'm right there. Should have remembered that when I said never. But I was what you would call a full-fledged card-carrying Pharisee. And what does that mean? That means I knew all the rules. I held myself to a very high standard, and I held everyone around me to a very high standard. How many of you know that's really fun to be around? It's really fun. I'm sure I drove a lot of people crazy, and a lot of people kind of away from me because of my rigid, unbending, unwavering, unmerciful standards. And I thought that was worship. I thought that was being godly and, that kind of thing. And I knew that people were watching me. When you're a pastor's kid, you kind of have an unfair fishbowl effect on your life. And I was going to raise the bar because pastor's kids have sort of a horrible reputation. And so in doing that, I actually lowered another bar, which was loving people. And I apologize for that. Any of you in this room that were affected by that? Maybe Kenneth, back to our college days when we were younger. But my husband loved me out of that. He loved me out of being so critical and out of so judgmental and out of so just nasty, really, and he's helped me become more merciful. And that is an act of worship. Helping your spouse become their best is an act of worship. And for those of you who are not married, I'm giving you free advice that you should put in that pocket and keep forever. Because when you appreciate, that means increase in value, the one that you've said, I'm sticking with you forever, guess what that does for you? It does the same. It helps you also increase in value. And that is an act of worship. Because then together, you guys are a team of awesomeness, right? Right, Toby and Stephanie? Team of awesomeness. I told you I was going to call on you. One of the things I love about my husband, again, he's not here, but he is like the sun. He is so good looking that it would hurt us. So, but, in this crunchy phase of my life, I'm a person, and I know you're just not going to believe this, but I like being right. I know, it's so shocking. But I do enjoy being right, and it's because I value my intelligence. I'm an educated woman and all this kind of stuff, and so I like knowing the right things. And there were times that dying on that hill meant everything to me. I'm going to win. And my husband had this lovely habit of when we would start, we don't argue very much, but whenever this word would come up, arguing, he would go and turn on worship music, and I'm like, oh, that is like the lowest blow. Nothing sucks the air out of an argument like turning on worship music, and I'm like, oh, shoot, it's over. I can't keep going. You have taken all my power with this worship music. And yes, thank you, Ted. And so now I know if I hear the worship music going on, he's just trying to change the atmosphere. Now it's mostly for himself because I've reached near perfection. But So at home, that's with your spouse, okay? So I've got scripture number 2 coming to you, Philippians 2, 3 through 7. Do nothing out of selfish ambition, like try to win constant arguments, whatever. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather in humility. It's a hard word for Texans. Rather in humility, value others above yourself. This includes our spouse. And I know that may seem like duh, but in the moment, really that's what the fight is about, is that preference. It's who's going to be right, who's going to win. And it's easier just to say, you know what, it's not worth it. I'm going to consider you above myself. Not looking to your own interest, but each of you to the interest of others. In your relationships with one another, have the same mindset as Christ, who, being in the very nature God, did not. Now this people, okay, so Jesus could have said, God card, don't forget that. But he said, being God, being in equality with God, could have been something that he used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness. We have the ability to see how he had all the credentials anyone would need. I mean, I think God is kind of like it trumps everything, and he decided not to ever play that card. He was like, I'm going to make myself human, and I'm going to wash other humans' dirty feet. I mean, when we hear feet washing, we think of our feet, like now that like walk around in shoes, but those were some nasty feet back then. Dusty, gross, callousy feet. And he washed them. He washed them. You know, he took that role of a servant. He took the act of service as worship very seriously. John 13:35 says this, by this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another. And man, see how great our life gets to be the testimony. Just how we carry ourselves, just how we walk around and just how we live gets to be the testimony. Not a whole lot of like proselytizing or witnessing has to come out of our mouth as much as if we live the life of love, people will then know. Isn't that cool? It's like we don't have to wear the t-shirt that says, my boss is a Jewish carpenter. Or be patient, God's not finished with me yet. You know, all those kinds of things. Ichthus, right, Kenneth? The tattoo he's going to get to be more like Blake Shelton. I know, soak it in. But, okay, so we got our spouse. Then the next area is our children. And man, nothing will cause you to depend on God like having children. Am I right? Man, those little things just make you like cling to God. Like I'm raising your soul. That's a big responsibility. It is an act of worship to parent your children, to feed them, clothe them, love them, discipline them. Oh, who didn't sign up for that wagon? I did not sign up for the discipline train, okay? I was like good with the diapers, but then the whole like disciplining constantly when I don't want to get up off the couch is an act of worship. It is worship. And that's how I view it. I'm working on it. That's why I'm teaching to myself. I'm going to go back and watch this so I can remember what I said. But it's living a life as an example is an act of worship. One thing about children is that they're like sponges. And they often reflect, get this, they often reflect what is worshiped in their environment. They often reflect what is worshiped in their environment. And that's something that I'm keenly aware of when my children just demand or want or beg for iPad time. I'm like, how much am I spending on my iPad? Okay, I probably need to cut that back because they're seeing me invest my time into the iPad or whatever it is. You know, be it sports, be it, you know, hospitality, or be it with friends. I mean, whatever, you can tell what's worshipped in the home because they kind of just shine it right back at you. Oh, wow, that was mean coming out of your mouth. Well, that probably was something that came out of my mouth. Yes, I can take ownership for a few things. Most of it's Ted, though. The rest of it is Ted. Ephesians 6:4 says this. Fathers, now I'm going to also add in crazy moms, do not exasperate your children. I have been known to exasperate a child or two. Instead, bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. So that's a clear way that we can worship, is by bringing them up in the training of the Lord. And bringing them here is step 1, or maybe step 4. You know, there's the other steps of doing it at home, making it real at home. I mean, one thing that I thought was strange growing up was that we only prayed at mealtime in our house. And I was like, I mean, it seems like there should be more than just prayer at mealtime. And I'm just telling you where I came from as a pastor's kid. I mean, no home is perfect. And I was like, I think it's weird that we as a family only pray at mealtime. And it's usually my sister is here. And they never picked her to pray because we'd be praying for like 8 minutes at the mealtime. And my dad would be like, all right, wrap it up, Melody. Like, we got stuff to do. And so she didn't always get the prayer opportunity because if we were hungry, it was like, no, not Melody, skip her. But we have the opportunity to show our worship through raising our children, through loving them, through preferring them, which seems so weird because they're so little and contribute so very littler. But we have that opportunity to worship through that and to make difficult choices and to try everything we can to support their growing brains and their growing hearts and figuring out their talents and figuring out how God wired them and personality testing them and sending them to every possible thing that we can squeeze out what God has put in there and let it flow. So that's children. Next one. At work. And I love talking about this because we love to compartmentalize work. Like we just say, this is a whole separate side of me that they don't have to know anything else about me but how I work. Isn't that right? Who likes to do that? Like, this is my work life, home life, work life, separate. And it's like, no. Actually, what's cool is if you want to look into the Hebrew lexicon definition thing of the Old Testament, to work or to worship means to work, to labor, to serve Jehovah, which is another name for God, to serve him with anything. That's what worship means. It means to work. So in fact, friends, our work life is very much a part of our worship. Very much a part. Who in here wants to be doing something different than what they're doing? That's it? 4? Everybody else, 5. Thank you. I see that hand. All right, so everybody else in here loves what they do. Just being clear, everybody else loves what they do. Great. I mean, I could sit down now. We can close. Salvation prayer? Okay. Some of us, if we would be, a little bit more pensive and honest, may want to be doing something a little bit different than what we're doing or doing it differently. How many of you, let's not do a show of hands. I might get better results that way. How many of you feel like you wish you could maybe have a new start at work? Like maybe you took a path of, I'm going to be one of the guys, or I'm going to, make everybody laugh by being lazy or kind of half doing my job. And I wish I could start over and really be a different person showing up at this job. I wish I could show up and be the one that's like really encouraging others and really working hard, but instead I'm the kid that's ribbing everybody and like keeping the morale nice and low. I mean, seriously, how many, I've moved several times. I understand the beauty and the power of a fresh start, getting to be a different person in a new place and say, that is no longer how I want to live my life. I want that fresh start. I want that clean break. And I want to really be able to live a life of worship where I work. I want people to know that they can come to me if they want to, ask a question about God. And I may not know the answer, but I want them to know that I would look it up and ask friends and try to find answers for them. But maybe you haven't yet set yourself up as the expert or as somebody even that has anything to do with God. Maybe nobody at your work knows this side of you. Work is worship. Being there, being a light, conducting your life in a way that is worshiping, because it is worshiping something. We've already covered that point if you wrote it down. It is one of our mission fields. Who here is like me and thinks that going to a place where they serve weird food on a missions trip is really scary? Like, seriously, weird food scares me more than working. I will build a house, I will paint a house, but please don't ask me to eat fish with an eye in it, because if it's looking at me, I'm gonna be like, oh, I can't eat that, I'm sorry. Peanut butter's in the bag, I'll be right back. That's what has been terrifying to me about missions trips. But guess what? I don't have to go anywhere to be on a mission. I can go to work, which for me is down the hall and to the right. Work from home, woo! But, I can come here and worship. I can lead a life group and worship. My husband can go to the hospital and worship. Lewis can drive a helicopter, or fly a helicopter. He can fly a helicopter and worship. And I'm like, so don't worship too hard up there, Lewis. Keep an eye on the sky. But, we have that ability to include him in every aspect of our life, and that is worship. Our speech. This is a hard one for me because I'm a talker. Are we constantly complaining? Are we expressing frustration? Are we lowering morale? Are we bad-mouthing? Are we gossiping? Our attitude. Are we negative? Are we ungrateful? Are we bitter? Are we apathetic at our jobs? Our work ethic. Are we lazy? Are we complacent? Are we even underproductive? Like, I don't want to make the other guys look bad, so I'm going to slow it down a little bit and, only do like 80 an hour instead of my 100 that I could do, Do we want to try to just like make everybody else feel comfortable by underperforming? Like that's part of how we are worshiping at work. How are we showing up? Are we trying our best? I think our culture kind of like tells you to work your best, but then mocks you if you do. You're a goody-goody. You're trying too hard. You're showing off. It's like, no, I'm actually just doing what I can. And I think we're scared to stand out sometimes in that way, but it's an act of worship. One of the things that I want to tell you about my husband, and I wish he was here. He was trying to get on call today. It didn't happen because I do feel weird talking about him without him glowing in his blue nurse suit there. But before we moved here, he worked in a warehouse in Nashville. And the funny thing was, when we moved from Dallas to Nashville back right after 9/11, I was the one that had the degree. I was top in sales for the nation, for Nordstrom. I mean, I had the pedigree, I had the credentials, and I moved to Nashville and could not find a job to save my life. And it was like night after night, humble pie. Scoop it up. You want some ice cream on it this time? It'll go down better. And then my husband, who does not have, or did not at the time have a degree, and did not have, signs on the wall saying how good he did at work, he comes up and gets a management job in like 4 days. And I was like, I got a little offended, just a little bit. Evidently, it was a year and a half of an offense because once I got over it, then things got better. But it was about a year and a half. And I had to learn, obviously, that being the horse drive person that I am, I had to learn that he could provide for me and that it's okay. But while he was there, so that job was the answer to prayer. It was great. But then what we started to see is there was nowhere to go. You're a warehouse worker. Well, maybe you're a warehouse too. That was like quarter in pay, got another quarter. So good, quarter an hour. And but that's it. There was one manager. And this was a boys' club kind of a situation, like where if you pandered to the boss, maybe you could, I don't know, work an overtime shift. I don't know. It was a real unfavorable environment. We'll say that. That's a nice way of saying it in church, unfavorable. And so at one point, the boss leaves, and he goes to another company, leaving this big open hole for manager. Well, my husband, he is a very intelligent man. He's a hard worker. He's there when it opens. He's there when it closes. He's just dedicated and loyal. He applies. At my suggestion and his unction as well, he applies. Bypassed. They pick another from the good old boys club to come in. All right. So then in order to kind of satiate his, ticked offness, they let him be in charge of inventory control. So now all of a sudden he's counting thousands of auto parts, thousands of shims or I don't even know, those little washers and whatever, lift kits and blah, blah, blah. He's counting everything daily, counting. And I'm like, how can you keep doing this? And so next thing you know, there's a vacancy in that one management spot again. And he's like, I've got seniority. I've been inventory control. This is mine. He applies for it. Does not get it. Well, at this point, it's personal. Who's been there before? Who's been there when you're like, it's personal now? Okay, we're going to talk about this. And so he had a direct relationship with the owner of the company, and he was like, well, I'm going to use that direct relationship, and calls him and is like, what's happening here isn't right. Come to find out that the first manager didn't like Ted, didn't like the fact that he worked really hard, didn't like the fact that he tried his best, didn't like the fact that he kind of made the manager look like he wasn't pulling his own weight. So started saying bad stuff about Ted over the years, setting him up for never, ever getting that one spot of promotion. Who can relate to something like that? Anybody? Kind of just getting bypassed. Eventually, After 8 years, we came to realize that this may not be Ted's end-all, be-all job. There may be other options out there in the world. And being the kind of coach that I am, before I was even coaching, I was like, maybe we should look at other things. And it was hard because he had 5 weeks paid vacation. Who knows that's hard to walk away from? It is, plus every major holiday. So he was off, all the time. It was great. But hating work. And how many of you know when you hate your job, what that does to your work ethic, what that does to your morale, what that does to your speech? Who knows what that does? Puts it in the toilet. Yep. How many of you know it's hard to worship at work when you're living in a toilet? Yes, it's hard. It's hard to then say, Jesus loves you. Here's a funny story. So one time I was getting my car fixed, and I was very frustrated because they quoted us one thing. It wasn't that. And then I said, I'm going to come get my car and take it out of here. And they said, well, it's going to be X amount of dollars for the investigation thing. And I was like, oh, no, this was your mistake. And Ted goes, Charity, I want you to walk in there, pay them, and then leave. Well, how many of you know, back to that whole thing about me liking being right? I was like, I hear you, Ted. I'll be right back. And I go inside. And about 20 minutes later, I frustratingly paid them after giving them several pieces of my mind and their process. And I walk out, and Ted's like, do you think you can go back in there and witness to them? And I was like, did you just play worship music? Like, is that what just happened? Because it sure did feel the same, like no more power. I'm just drained like kryptonite. It's like my powers are gone. And he's telling the truth. He's telling the truth. Could I go back in there in that moment and witness? Not effectively, we'll say it like that. I had pretty much blown any chance of introducing them to the Lord and Savior of my life by giving them all those pieces of my mind. So again, we have the ability to worship at work. And back to finishing Ted's story. God squeezed him out of there. Discomfort is a gift. Who's uncomfortable sometimes? Discomfort is a gift. It nudges you in the right direction. And Ted eventually found out that he's really smart. And he became a nurse, got great grades, got full ride through nursing school. As a 36 to 40-year-old man, became a nurse, reinvented himself. Our children got to watch him go from, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up, to I know I want to be a nurse and I want to help people. And I'm thankful for those rejections after rejections, putting him into position for what he is meant to do. So don't get mad at those things and lose your worship at work, all right? Your life speaks. It's a testimony. The last place I want to talk about where we get to worship is in our purpose. One of the slickest moves, people, this is so slick, that the enemy makes against us is to get us to believe that there is no rush, in living our purpose. Take it easy. You can begin tomorrow. You can wait a minute. You've got some time. Man, that line, you've got some time, is the biggest lie. Anybody know anybody gone too soon? Yeah. You don't necessarily have so much time. We don't know, and I'm not here to make a doom and gloom thing out of it, but hey, get started. Get going. The devil wants us to take it easy. He wants us to just sit back and relax and not just push, not go. Today becomes someday, and someday becomes never. Psalms 90:12, which in fact this is Moses' only psalm, which I think is exciting because we tend to think it's David's thing. Teach us to number our days. That way we may gain a heart of wisdom. That's that passionate pursuit, not that passive pursuit. It's the difference there. Ephesians 5:15-16 says, so be careful how you live. Do not live like fools, but like those who are wise. Make the most of every opportunity in these evil days. Can we agree these days are kind of nasty, kind of evil? Yeah, so let's make the most, not make the half or the almost or put off what we can do. So many people have resigned to the fact that life isn't going to go any better for them. They've just resigned. This is how it's going to be. There's no sense in trying. What is that worshiping? It's worshiping doubt. It's worshiping fear. Many people have resigned to the belief that they couldn't possibly be the one that God would choose to use because of their past. What does that say about the belief of the power of Jesus taking our sins and his death being the payment for our debt of sins? if we believe that our past is more powerful than that blood, what is that worshiping? It's worshiping the power of the sin over the payment. Jeremiah 1:5 says this, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. I knew you. I knew what you would be like. I knew your preferences. I gave you your fingerprints. I gave you your passions. I gave you your talents. I knew you. I knew what you would do. I knew what you would struggle with. I knew what you would excel with. Before you were born, I set you apart." Each of us, how many of you know that, I've got 4 kids, and I'm just sitting there going, am I still the right parent for this job? These are so vastly different, He knew us, and He appointed us as a prophet to the nations. And this is the cool thing. We get to be in a nation. This is spoken to every child of God. And so our nation is where we work. It's our sphere of influence. It's who we get to be around. It's how we show up at those places. You have a purpose and a circle of influence of people, a people group that needs you to show up as an act of worship to God. Isn't that cool? One of the things that the holidays always reminds me, outside of the glorious food. Hey, can I get an amen to the food? Woo. Thank God for recovering from a cheat day, A cheat weekend, a cheat month, whatever you want to call it. If none of it's cheating, it's just your life. Okay, whatever. But the holidays remind me that there are hurting people all around us. They may show up at the parties. They may smile. They may act like everything is fine. They may be sitting right next to you. It may be you. And we get the opportunity to worship God by caring for those around us. Even if now friends, this is really big, even if we are one of the ones that are hurting, even if we are ones that are having a dark time in our lives, remembering lost ones, remembering, what could have been, remembering, and some of us have to be around difficult family members. Don't raise your hand. The holidays may be a time where it was like, oh, you get anxiety because you don't want to have to be in those situations, but yet you're related by blood and DNA, and they make you, but there are people around us that are hurting physically, emotionally, relationally, financially, and the holidays just tend to highlight that and underscore that pain, and it can make people feel very alone. It can make people feel like no one knows, no one cares, does God see me? When in fact God is inviting you in that pain to worship. He's inviting you in that pain to reach out to somebody, because I'm telling you, somebody always has it worse, right? And that's not just to make you feel bad for feeling bad, it's to remind you that you're not alone, that you can still be a person that God uses to reach out and to love someone next to you. Colossians 3:16 and 17 says this, "Let the message about Christ in all its richness fill your lives. Teach and counsel each other with all the wisdom He gives." Now here's the music part. "Sing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs to God with thankful hearts." And that's part of it. So I don't want you to think that music isn't a part. Singing is a part of it. "And whatever you do or say, do it as a representative of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks through Him to God the Father." Our lives are worship. Everything about us, every choice we get to make, even our failures. I've learned more through my mistakes, through my failures, through my shortcomings, than I probably ever have on those hilltop moments where you're like, yes, I'm preaching at CFC. I've learned more in things that didn't go the way. And I'm a high expectation person. Like when I want something, or when I really want to do something, it's like it becomes a high thing that I really push towards and I work towards. And so a lot of things, I've been able to make happen. But there are certain doors that only God can open. And I know that you may be one of those people that's hurting. You may be one of those people that needs a door to open that you can't make it happen. You can't force the door open in a relationship. You can't force the door open financially. You can't force the door open in a physical healing in your own strength. But what I want to do is I want to invite us to worship God by reaching out to those around us. Would you mind standing? We are all God's favorite. I've got 3 sisters, and we do argue over who is mom's favorite. And I've just stopped arguing because I know I am. And my mom goes, as long as you each think that, we're fine. And that's the truth. She's got us all thinking that we're numero uno, but I really technically am numero uno, so I'm double there. But with God, we literally are all his children. And what's so great is we're not his grandchildren. It doesn't matter what my parents believe. It only matters what I believe. He only has children. And I love that about him. And we are all equal. The Bible says he does not have favorites. And so that's reassuring. And I want to tell you that everybody is going through something hard. It may not be the same hard as your hard, but we are all going through something hard. And we get the opportunity now to just say, God, I want to worship you with my whole heart, with my whole life, with how I show up at church. I look at just how much Kenneth and Juliet are pouring into our youth right now. I don't know if you even know the hours that they spend investing. I cry every time. I'm sorry. I try not to. But hours on Saturday. They're doing it again today. I'm like, God bless her for taking my son for 2 hours on a Sunday. It's Christmas early. And, but they pour their lives into this. The people that run sound, that run lights, that are back there with the babies. Who would want to trade to be back there with the babies? I don't see any hands going up. So they are worshiping with their lives. There's room for you. There's room for you. It may not be with the kids. It may be greeting. It may be cleaning up the sanctuary after we're done, because people still forget their coffee cups that they brought in here. We get the chance to worship with our lives, with every aspect, with putting the grocery cart back. That's a form of worship. It's living at a standard of, I want to do things as Jesus would do things. And yes, there may be times when you come up short. That's why God gives us that new thing every day called new mercy every day, because he knows we will need it. He knows that we will depend upon that gift to wake up to every Sunday, every Monday, every Tuesday, and so on. We get it. Can we pray together?